We would like to send the message that space and observing the Earth from space is one of the very important issues, because from space we can really collect the data for more than 50% of the most important climate variables. So space is really the tool for climate monitoring.
In terms of our understanding of how the climate has evolved through satellite monitoring, how would you say that has progressed in the past decades? Is this something very new, or has the data been around for a long time?
We are collecting data from space since many years, and very important also, we collected this data and we stored it, so it's still available. So then this is the basis. If you want to observe climate change, you need the data for a long period, not only for a week or for a year. You need it for years, for decades, and therefore yes, we are doing that worldwide, in Europe especially, yes.
Give us a sense of the scale of the operation then you're putting together, because it's a big world and satellites are, we can see one just on your left shoulder, they're small. I know they move very fast in outer space, but they're small. So how many do you have up there, and what kind of level of scale are you looking at in terms of different observations?
The good thing is, of course, ESA has several satellites up there with different capabilities, so either to observe with radar technology or to observe in the normal visible light, and different types of satellites. But the good thing is, this is not only the ESA satellites, but we are linked to, for instance, the United States of America and others, so that we have at the end of the day a full picture of the Earth together with our partners worldwide.
So in terms of these partnerships, can you give me a sense of how you're working with other agencies? What kind of global links do you have?
We have global links, for instance, in the United States of America, of course, with NASA, but also with USGS. So with organizations in America really also doing Earth observation to see what is happening with the climate. But what for me is very important, that we look also, for instance, for CO2 emission. This cannot be just the challenge or the work of task of one nation or Europe only, because then it will not be accepted by others. So what is very important is that we have a global network in the future where we exchange the data, so that we have a common understanding, because politicians will look to the data very seriously and say, okay, is this data reliable or not? And the best thing is to have a global coordinated data collection.
Do you think that there have been debates in the past over climate science, over the collection of data? Do you think that satellite data is more widely accepted as being accurate than perhaps other forms? Is it easier for politicians to accept data from a satellite than perhaps from a buoy floating in the middle of the South Atlantic?
We should not say either or. What is needed in the future is, the keyword is data fusion. So using data from space, data from in situ, and data coming from the air, from airborne systems. And if we put them together, we get really a full picture of the whole world, and this makes the differences. And we can also make a difference between, for instance, CO2 emissions of natural sources and of industrial sources. So therefore, space is really a global view of the Earth, and therefore it's very valuable, much more than just in situ measurements, but we have to combine them.
So you can tell the difference between gases just through satellite pictures?
Yes, we can.
Wow. And can you obviously not hover over a city, because satellites move very fast, but you can go over specific cities and specific countries and check where various hotspots of emissions are?
We cannot stop over a city, for sure, because we have to stay in orbit. There are also special orbits where you can have a longer view, but usually the optics and the instruments on board of a satellite are able to cover the picture, even flying very quickly above a city. And if you have enough satellites, so that you have a short revisiting time flying above the same location again and again, you can easily identify hotspots and also the development of these hotspots.
One of the big debates at the moment at the negotiations in Paris is about a measuring, verification, reporting system under a kind of new transparency mechanism countries are talking about. How would you like to see satellite data incorporated into that? How do you think it could be used by countries?
So the basic principle of ESA is free and open access to the data. That means that we are giving our data free to the public so that they can be used directly without any special hurdle. And I think this is a very important aspect, to have a transparent understanding of what is going on. And as I said again, we need to coordinate worldwide with the main stakeholders in that area in order to have an acceptance by the politicians of the different states of the world that these data are really reliable. It should not be coming just from one source, but ESA would like to play the role of a broker, a mediator worldwide, to make it really possible that we have the different data from different countries and join forces.
Do you foresee a situation where perhaps in 5, 10, 15 years there is a network of satellites constantly traversing the atmosphere and monitoring levels of emissions from all around the world? So in a sense there is no hiding place for any country. We have a network of satellites, as you say, from different authorities, be it the Chinese, the Russians, NASA or the ESA, and we have a set of data which no one can really question.
I don't foresee it. We are working on that. So this is exactly what I think what has to be done. Of course, a European satellite can cover the whole world already. That's possible. But the acceptance of the data is rising if we have the data coming from different satellites of different nations. And it's not only the atmosphere, it's at the same time also the forest, to look to deforestation and also forest degradation, for instance, and other aspects like that. So it's a set of data which we are ready to provide to the politicians, but again in a worldwide coordinated way.
Where would the data feed into? Is there a UN agency, or does there need to be one which collates and filters this data and then presents it every 5 years, perhaps in the same way that every 5 years we're going to have a review of national ambitions? Is there a need to have it presented every 5 years?
The first thing is to have the data collected. The second one is to have the data stored in a way that you can even access it in 10 or 20 or 50 years. This is very important. And the third step is processing of the data. And this can be done by different institutions at different times, not only every 5 years, but it's a permanent task to process data, to see what are the changes of the Arctic ice, of the forest, etc. So it's a permanent task, and I don't see that we have to create a special agency for that. This can be done together with all the agencies worldwide and the different entities, not only agencies, but also research entities, etc.
Which other entities does ESA look to partner with? I'm not an expert. I know the sort of Russians have clearly got an advanced space program and serve the Americans. Who else would be involved?
Well, you see, in Europe we have already a very good established Earth observation program. One is directly by the European Space Agency, and the other one is financed by the European Commission. And of course, both types of data are accessible. So we are doing our homework, and we give this data to researchers of any type of institution, whether it's the World Meteorological Office or whether it's universities or other entities, so they can use our data directly.
Okay, just a couple of final questions. In terms of the observations from the European satellites in the past 10 years or so, and you said it needs to be over a longer term basis, what would you say are the key observations that have come out of your work? What are the big changes? Like just over your left shoulder there's I think it's a picture of the North Pole, and there's always a big debate over whether the summer sea ice is declining or rising. It is. So but could you give me the key sort of highlights?
So what we could observe in the past, and where we have also, because we have all the data available, we could show that the Arctic ice is breathing between summer and winter, but it's gradually reduced. So we could show that. We could show that the rainforest is really getting smaller and smaller. So we have, for several aspects, we have these tendencies, and also change of the atmosphere, etc. We have all this data, and we published it already.
And in terms of public and global acceptance of climate change being a threat, what role do you think really cool technology like satellites has in kind of bringing that home? It just seems to me that people might be more accepting of of data when it comes from a really fantastic piece of kit like the one just on your left than perhaps from a boring old climate scientist who's trekked up a mountain to take some data measurements every couple of months.
You see, if we are measuring with a satellite some effect on the Earth, it's the same instrument measuring the effect in Europe, in China, in Russia, in the United States of America, in South America. So it's always the same instrument. This gives already some reliability of the data. And therefore, as space is working globally all the time, I think the acceptance of the data is also very high. And it's also data coming from independent institutions. So we, ESA, is an intergovernmental organization, so we are not a company or whatever, so we are an intergovernmental organization working together with the European Commission, especially in the field of Earth observation and our international partners. So I think one can directly rely on our data because they are independent and not any governed by any sort of private money or so.